reality, the average business owner that is successful is 45.
Social media culture and the influencer, lifestyle that we have kind of gotten this idea that, starting younger is much better, but we don't take into account how many successful businesses don't have a huge online presence. And so you have to kind of check in with yourself from time to time and remind yourself that the reality is that most successful startups uh, owners are older. So you have to kind of shut off the noise sometimes,
Hmm.
because I experienced it myself. I'm like, man, I should have started this 20 years ago and not over 40.
So, do you think you missed out on your shot of starting a business because you're not in your 20s anymore? Think again. Your 40s aren't too late. They're actually the sweet spot. You got the life experiences, the emotional intelligence, the connections, and most importantly, the clarity. Today, we're embracing why your 40s is the perfect time to bet on yourself and embrace entrepreneurship and finally build something that's yours, whether it's a side hustle, a reinvention, or a full on career pivot. This episode is for you to give yourself permission to go for it. I'm super excited because I have an amazing guest today. And I think that you're going to resonate with her story and the value that she's going to add. So, thank you so very much for being a guest today, Carla.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about this topic. As someone over 40, it's always a question, right?
Hmm. Yeah. And I would love for you to share a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. So I actually started my business. It's almost 10 years ago. And I was in my 30s, late 30s. And actually I might have been 40 already. Yeah, I was already 40. And so what happened, I was working full time and I decided I needed a creative outlet, and I always loved interior design, and that was actually the first business I started. And it was great. Met a great community of people, worked with some amazing clients, and then people started asking me for help with their business.
Mhm.
I have an MBA, so it wasn't a far stretch for me to really move over to coaching, even though I was reluctant to do so, to move over
Mhm.
to business coaching. And then, of course, as you know, automation and all of those things. As a person who also had a undergrad experience with computer science. And so it was a natural fit for me. I've recently pivoted and I'm doing more on the wellness side of business ownership with work-life balance and productivity, and not burning out so that we can show up for ourselves in our business.
And I love how you were able to share just like the journey. I think sometimes what keeps people from getting started is because they think that one, we have to have it all figured out. And two, it's like this very linear process. In reality, it's an evolution.
Right.
I saw the statistics saying that the average age of a successful startup founder is 45. Like,
Yeah.
what? Like, I think hustle culture and TikTok and Instagram and all these people, like, if you've been born in the 1980s, like you're old, they put all this out there. And we think that it's not normal. In reality, the average business owner that is successful is 45.
And I think a lot of it has to do, like you said, with the social media culture and the influencer, lifestyle that we have kind of gotten this idea that, starting younger is much better, but we don't take into account how many successful businesses don't have a huge online presence, or social
Hmm.
media presence, I should say. And so you have to kind of check in with yourself from time to time and remind yourself that the reality, like you said, is that most successful startups owners are older. So you have to kind of shut off the noise sometimes,
Hmm.
because I experienced it myself. I'm like, man, I should have started this 20 years ago and not over 40, and now that
Mm.
50, just turned 50 in December, I definitely am like, man, I feel like I'm behind the 8 ball, you know?
Well, did you ever feel as if like you wanted to be an entrepreneur? Because I feel like some people, like they're like, oh, I always knew there was going to be this day I'm going to have a business. And then some people, it's something that they start to explore out of curiosity. Which was it for you?
I think I always knew either I was gonna be a business owner or do something in business. I was
Hmm.
one of those kids that like to carry around like a briefcase with little notes and notepads and all of the stuff, right? So that
Hmm.
that was me playing with old, briefcases and those little pink pads with the message things and all of that stuff from, back in the day. I was talking about a Rolodex and,
Yeah.
my kids didn't know what I was talking about. But I was the one that was playing with all of those kinda things, so I knew I was gonna do something either in corporate business or my own business. I was hustling candy in elementary school, so
Okay, so like it's something that for anyone that's listening, like if it's always been sitting underneath the current for you, like it's never too late. And I think that that can sometimes be that fear with you starting to like branch out and for people to know, like you also have experience, career experience and education. One of the common fears that people face is like they're like I'm too late or I don't have enough energy to do this. Can I even compete in the marketplace? Was that anything that you felt in the beginning when you decided to make the decision to start?
well, when I decided to start, I didn't have that feeling so much because I was in the process of I had already gotten established in my job, my full time
Mm.
job. So I felt like I needed something to do in that extra time, and so I was like, I need something. I'm not one of those people. I have to have a project. I have to be working
Mm.
on something. And so I felt like I had the energy. I felt like it was a great time to start with where we were with the economy and all of those things. And so I didn't feel like it was too late. I wish I had a started earlier, but I had no one to look toward for as a roadmap to starting a business. And so it was really me like carving it out from scratch.
I love that you mentioned that because I think sometimes our circle of influence, be it family, friends, just the environment that we're in, can sometimes impact us making that decision. When you say that it was like, was that not the case? Like with the people around you, were most people in careers, or are most people that you have a blend of entrepreneurship, or just really no one around you at that time was actually exploring that?
No one in my family, no one in my circle, in my friend group, no one at all. Now I have some friends who are also business owners, but when I started, there was no one. I literally had to get it out the mud, as they say.
Yeah.
Joining Facebook groups, reading a lot of books, asking people in the industry. Like I said, it was interior design. So connecting with that community was really helpful. So I'm glad the online space was available because I was able to get a lot and glean a lot from those who had experience in the industry.
And that's a really great tip because some people are in that space. And what happens is because maybe the people around them are kind of fear prone or risk prone. And
Yeah.
so you're like, I have this great idea. And it can be something super amazing. And it can be something that there's a gap inside of your local community. But if your circle of influence doesn't see it and that's not natural for them, they
Hmm.
will unknowingly like kill your dreams. And I'm
Yeah.
sure in the beginning, you may have even experienced some unintentional negativity when you started. Was that the case? Because I find that sometimes can be very common for people.
Well, the interesting thing is, and it's a blessing and a curse. My family, I come from a low socioeconomic area, so I
Mm,
was the first in many things, right? First to go to college, first to finish college, first to do a master's degree. So people in my circle was used to me doing something that was different.
okay.
And so if they had something to say, it wasn't I didn't know about it, it wasn't to me, just because they were used to me kinda doing my own thing. So, like I
Mm.
said, blessing and a curse at the same time because I wish sometimes that would have had someone I could, kind of lean on for support and that kind of things. It's just kind of a different experience.
Yeah, and I think that that's what is super important for people to take in consideration, especially when we see these glimpses of people lives on social
Mhm.
media and we don't know like the whole perspective. Like for myself, my mom, she worked in education, but she also had a business. A lot of the women and family members in my immediate family all have businesses. I remember because my mom had a daycare center that she sold when I was 18, when I turned 18. So I was in there, doing sales per se, helping with people pay their things and helping with my mom however she needed me to help because she wanted me to have that experience. So some things that I may not necessarily be fearful of or I need to develop is because I had years and decades of that experience. And I think that that's why it's not always the most productive for people. It doesn't matter if you're 45, 25, or 55, 65. You don't want to only see what highlight reels because you never know the journey. And I think that's something that's really valuable for like you at 50, myself at 44. We've had a lot of life experiences
Mhm.
that have gotten us to where we are that allows for us to shine in the lights of which we need to shine. So one thing you did mention, like I wish I would have started earlier, but like let's go back, before you started your business, late 30s, like what would you say was your mindset about business and entrepreneurship?
Remember, when I was married, I kind of dabbled in like the selling jewelry or something like
Mm,
M kind of.
MLM?
And but I didn't really take it seriously because at that time, so and that's another thing I don't know if we talk about it enough. My focus was just on like the marriage and supporting my husband and his goals and his dreams, and mine were nowhere in the picture. And so
Mm.
when you say what was my mindset, that it was just about like making the marriage work, creating a peaceful home, and doing all of those things. And I wasn't really focused on my goals and my desires at that time.
And I think a lot of, from what I see, because I see that that can be sometimes very common, at least from some of the stuff I see on TikTok. Every now and then it might come across like my feed where now this lady is getting in the process of getting a divorce. And they're like, I spent all this time building, for this family or building, being a supportive partner. Now I have to figure out what I even want to do. And I appreciate you sharing that because I feel like that's extremely relatable, especially at this age bracket, because it is something that skill sets we may not even think to explore. And I think sometimes what the hardest part can be is that if you're with a partner that doesn't see that, it may not necessarily be the most supportive. It can probably make it even harder for people to thrive.
Right. And the part is it wasn't like he was unsupportive. I wasn't
Exploring
putting
it.
myself my goals or desires first. It wasn't like I wanted to do something he wasn't supported. It just wasn't even part of my everyday thought process. I worked or whatever, at the time, but it was building myself wasn't part of my thought processes at the time.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. And so now you're in your late 30s. What changed in your 40s that made you decide to launch something new?
Like I said, I by that time, I had been a teacher for a while. Before teaching, I had worked in various corporate and human development, human services jobs. And someone asked me, like, if you could do whatever without concern for money, what would you do?
Mm,
And that brought me to teaching. And so a few months after that conversation, I was in the classroom,
mm,
and so, that was in my mid-30s, so even teaching was even a second career. So that was in my mid-30s, and so by the time I turned 40, like I said, I had pretty much mastered that, and I needed something new. I'm a project person. I have to be working on something, and so that's when I decided to start the business. I don't remember, like, what sparked it, like, if there
okay.
was a particular moment, but I know I needed to do something with the extra time, I had on my hands because I'll start spiraling if I'm just sitting too long.
And I'm glad you know that about yourself. That's where I think it's important for us to acknowledge our life experiences and some of the truths about ourselves. And I'm curious, how did some of your life experiences or past careers give you an advantage in doing business or starting your business?
Well, the type of business I decided to start was kind of near and dear to my heart because interior decorating is something that my whole family has always enjoyed. Like I said, I came from a pretty disadvantaged family economically, but one thing was always on point was that decor, right?
Mhm.
We would
It's not gonna
spend
look like it.
yeah, that was the one thing my mom, my aunts, that's the one thing they did. They always had nice homes, even if they weren't expensive homes. And
Yes.
so we would sound like Saturday night when we didn't have anything to do. It was just me and my brother and my mom and my dad. Me and my brother and my mom, we would what we call change the room around, right? And
Mhm.
so
Yep.
basically, take everything off the walls, rearrange all the furniture, and just like redo the whole thing. And so that was such a joy for me growing up, and so naturally, that was kind of the first business I thought of, and by this time, I had lost my brother, and so it was part of a way to honor him,
Mm.
and the business was named it was a combination of my name and his name, and so that was one of the things that I decided I wanted to do with that extra time that I had was to do that.
I think that that is a great tip for people too, because I feel like sometimes, like with hearing your share, immediately made me think of like if someone is sitting there and they're like over 40 and they're like, okay, one, I might need to have a side hustle because like let's be
Mhm.
real.
Mhm. Yeah.
Expenses are expensing, and
Yeah.
and, for those of us that might have kids or want families or buy houses, like, it just takes a lot more to be able to afford those type of things. Doing something side from a side hustle or to just even shift your career, it takes the ability to look at, like, what are some of the things I like to do?
Mhm.
Because I always tell people, you don't wanna just do things for money because when things get hard or the results aren't fast, if you're only doing it for money, you will likely quit. So
Mhm.
it's easier if you're doing something that is something you always were curious about, to be able to have the courage to take the risk. And one of the things they do say is like, of course, in your 40s, because we're thinking like, oh, retirement and all these other things. There can be this underlining, okay, what about financial stability? How risky is this? Was that ever something that crossed your mind about how am I can I do this from a financial standpoint, or is this too risky for me to even jump into?
So going back, so the great thing about the time we live in is technology, right?
Mm,
So at the time, after learning about the industry and how I could carve an area out for myself, there was this thing that was kind of getting popular. It was still fairly new, but not real new. And is what we call e-design. And so that allowed me to maintain my full-time job and still do the interior design because I could create these e-design package, which is basically electronic design packages all on my computer and all during my non-work hours. And so
mm,
with all the technology that was around at the time, there was a lot of interior design technology. There was, the whole Zoom and everything. It was online shopping. And so I was able to create a business that worked around my work schedule. So I didn't have that stress of having to give up my steady income in order to build the business
mm.
and I could build it, on my time around my schedule. And because it was a interior design business, it wasn't a B2B, it was a B2C. Clients were more than happy to meet on the weekends because that's when they
Oh,
were.
true.
Yeah.
That's so true. And for people that don't know what B2B or B2C, can you please explain it? Because some
Oh
people that
yeah.
might be a new term for them as well.
Right. So B2B is business to business. That means your customers are other businesses. When I was doing interior design, it was B2C, business to customer. And so because they were working 9 to 5s as well, us meeting on the weekends, Saturday mornings, afternoons worked really well. Sometimes we'd meet on a Sunday afternoon. And so it just worked really well with my work schedule. And then I had the summers and the breaks to do the deep
Do
dives
it.
into the businesses when I needed to.
I hope that y'all are taking notes on this because this is really insightful to think about. Because let's say, which I don't recommend for anyone to just like YOLO out there. like like,
Not
I
in
mean,
this
unless
economy.
no, not in this economy. I mean, unless you saved up and you got some extra contributions, or you real scrappy and you about to be out there Uber Eats and Door Dashing and you're gonna grind. But to be honest, over your 40s, that's not even something that you probably even want to do. And I think that that's something we should even talk about a little bit too. But I think it's important for anyone that's listening, like think to yourself, okay, if I do want to do this, and if I'm working, even if you're working with B2B, like I would say in my consulting business, that the businesses I'm working with, they're often have full-time jobs still yet. So they need to also have some flexibility in the evening. So if you are going to be servicing businesses, like business owners, like solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, it may be having some availability in the evening. You do that around your schedule. So I do believe both can exist where you can still have a great side business per se that's making great money without you having to put yourself out there and struggle because it's not for everyone and it's don't allow for social media to make it seem like
Right.
everybody's in Bora Bora.
Right, and eating, having coffee on the terrace in France.
I mean, I remember legit during the pandemic watching someone's thing, and I was just like, "What am I doing wrong?" I mean, I've
Right.
been in at that point, I was in business for 12 years, and I'm just like, "You're either scamming, scheming, or something." I was like, "This doesn't make sense." Like financially, and then as we found out, some people were out there scheming, but it is what it is.
And
But I think
scheming and scamming.
exactly. So this is why you don't want to compare. And the thing is like what I love is that you shared is that you use something that your past experiences and you already were exploring certain things. So would you say that you were pretty disciplined and focused already when you first started, or were those things that you actually had to get better at developing?
I'd say I was pretty disciplined and focused. Like I said, by this time, I had finished my MBA, and just the process of going to college and graduating and going to grad school and graduating, I had to cultivate a level of discipline, like I said, because I was the first in my family to do either. And
Mm,
so it wasn't easy, but I had to cultivate that skill, that discipline. And so I was able to leverage that into the business. And also I had the benefit by this time, like I said, I was divorced by this time and I
mm,
don't have children.
yeah.
So if I stayed up working on my business, no one was suffering, from
Mm,
that. And so you have to look at like what can you contribute to, building the business, and it's going to be different from it for everybody. Like you say, you had role models that I didn't have, and if somebody else may have some other resources that I don't have, and I may have resources and skill sets that they don't have, and so you have to kind of work with the raw material you're dealt with,
mm,
and use that to leverage that so you're successful. And I want to go back to one thing you said about working for the money, because I've experienced that too. And it's really attractive to do that when you've stepped away from your job, because I did do that. I love teaching for a while to focus on the business. And it's really easy to just start taking on work for the money. And I know for a fact that that often leads to burnout, which is what
yeah.
happened to me. So you definitely want to be in alignment with whatever you're doing.
And I appreciate you being transparent about that because
Right.
I think too, what adds to it is that when we're only chasing the money, sometimes we can take clients that we don't need or we should have said no to. Then we'll build a business that it honestly leaves us resentful. And one of the things I like too is like when you don't want to be in a position that you look back and you're especially over 40 because honestly like my bandwidth of really caring or wanting to do it's not the broadest.
Right.
So it's like, okay, if I'm going to build something, I don't want to build something I want to hate.
Right.
Like if I'm in this next chapter of my life, the last thing I want to do is use the next 30 years or 3 years of my life doing something that I legitimately loathe just
Mhm.
because of money when I can actually take the time to think about what I want to build and enjoy this next chapter.
And it's not always easy, like you said, because
Yeah.
a lot of time the money things that make you the money are not always what you wanna be doing, right?
Hmm.
And, I found myself in that position. It's like, I really love doing this, but it's a harder sell, right?
Yeah.
And so you have to really decide, like you say, at this stage in my life, I'll take the harder sell than the stress of doing something else.
Yeah, it's like, I don't wanna do volume. I have absolutely no desire. Like, there's certain things in my career, I'm like, "Yeah, I absolutely have no desire to do that." And I think that it's because too and I would love to hear, because you are, over you're 50, and
Mhm,
I can even tell the difference between myself from my 30s to my 40s.
mhm.
Like my schedule, my disciplines, they have shifted. Have you seen a shift from like how you show up as an entrepreneur in your 40s compared to an entrepreneur at your 50s?
Yes, absolutely. Like, we were talking about, like, just bandwidth. Like, as I get older, I need more me time. Introvert and extrovert, like, I always thought those things were static, and they are not. When I was in my 20s, I needed to be around people to be energized and all of the and now it's the exact opposite. I need some time to myself in order
Mhm,
for my brain to just have, like, some peace and some freedom. And so as I get older, as I've shifted from 40s to 50, I need more and more of that processing time and that time to unwind and download, all the things in my mind. And so I just assume that as we age, that gets to be more and more because I used to couldn't understand, like, why
mhm.
is this person, older people in your family, they're just at home all the time. Like, how you just
Yeah,
in this house all the time, and now it's like, I just wanna sit in the house all the time.
family,
Right.
self-care, dating, all that stuff. So what boundaries and systems have you had to think about in this next chapter?
So, of course, as the work-life balance coach, I have developed what I call the, balancing acts. So these are everyday routines to help me be productive and yet balanced because we don't wanna go to the other extreme either, right? Where
Mm,
we're not being productive because we're spending too much time in the relaxed state. And so these routines help keep me productive but yet balanced. And when I think about, like, the outside world, like family obligations and things like that. As I change seasons, like I tell because I'm at the age where the little cousins, like we were just like we just talking about, they are grown now and they have their own little kids, and
mhm.
so they laugh at me because I show up, I kiss them, and I take a picture, and I'm on my way. I say I did my time when y'all were young. I'm a second generation auntie now. So they get the high and buy the holiday auntie because I can't do all the games did it
Yeah,
all recitals. I can't do all of it anymore. I did my time with you guys, and
yeah.
so and I'm okay with that.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
I put in my work, I put in my work. So, understanding that I can't be everywhere all the time, I try to show up for the most important things and, allow myself the grace to not be at all the things.
Valuable, valuable tips.
Yes.
So, it's great to hear that. And I think sometimes what's the biggest part, and even the biggest, one of the main reasons for me to even do this podcast was the fact that I feel that people can perceive that it's all figured out or it's
Mm,
all looks perfect and neat and not seeing that we are setting boundaries.
mm,
Like we're not doing and being for all people at all times. It's because we had to learn how to put systems and structures
mhm,
inside of our lives to be able to have it all based on what is our all, and understanding that some days we're better at it while
mm,
other days we may, like, some days I'm an amazing business owner and there are other days where I'm checked out and I'm just taking care of my little cousins, which is
right.
totally fine. And I think allowing ourselves this space to let both exist in the same
Mm.
place and the same space is really super important. So, one thing I would love for you to do is like, what advice would you give to someone that's 40 plus who feels like it's too late to pivot or start something new?
Absolutely. So when I hinted a little bit about how I was doing things that weren't in alignment just for the money.
Hmm.
And so the money was good, but what it did was it led me to burn out. And so when I was in the hospital bed, burned out, trying to figure out what was going on, I made the immediate decision that it was time to pivot. This was 2 years ago. This was January 2023. And so I decided that even, at that age, I was what, 47 at the time. Maybe I think I had just turned 48 actually, because it was a few weeks after my birthday. I made the decision to pivot. Business was doing well. I was making money, but I was not going to allow the business to impact my health the way it had been. And
Mm,
so it was scary to make that decision because I knew that this new direction would be a harder sell. I knew that my finances would take a hit, and that's
mm,
when I decided to go back to the classroom so that I could restructure the business and readjust without having to change my whole lifestyle because of income. And so it was a scary decision, and and a brave one for me to make, because I had established myself in the industry where I was known, and here I am pivoting to an industry where I am virtually unknown.
mhm,
But I had to decide, like, what was more important. Like you said, did I want to continue doing something that not only was burning me out, but I wasn't even enjoying anymore?
mhm.
And so I decided that, hey, in this next chapter, I wanted to enjoy my business again.
So do you think it's valuable for someone to really be okay with starting small or just starting part-time instead of just feeling overwhelmed or just jumping into the deep end? Do you think that
Yeah.
can be pretty valuable?
I think it's very valuable. It allows you the grace to learn an industry, not only
Mhm.
the industry, because there's two things we're working right with, right? You're working with the industry you're in, and you're working with the backside of that, the whole operations of being a business owner, the marketing and the sales and the systems. And if you're making jewelry on the other side, you're wanting to stay, abreast of that industry and what's going on, the styles and the materials and all of those things. So you're having to wear these two hats, right? And it just reminded me of the book, The E-Myth,
Mm,
where really it's like three different things going on when you're a business owner. And so you may be really good at making the jewelry, and you may really need some work on the other part of the business, the back end and all of those stuff. So when you start small, it allows you to do that and test and fail without it impacting
yeah.
your lifestyle, especially when you don't have, like, a safety net, right? You don't
Yeah.
have a spouse or someone to lean on, or, family or something and I know the whole there's this part of it that glorifies, "I was homeless and I was sleeping in my car, and I didn't wanna do that."
You're like, "That is not my ministry, and I don't want that a
I
part of
didn't
my
wanna
story."
I didn't wanna go through that journey of sleeping in my car and or couch surfing, and, if you choose that route, you choose that route, I get it.
Yeah,
There's some pros to that too, but it wasn't for me, and so, starting on the side like I did with my first business allowed me to learn and grow and develop as a business owner,
yeah.
um, and as a technician in that area, while still maintaining my lifestyles.
It's funny because when you were sharing about the couch surfing, during the pandemic, I had decided, I was gonna sell everything and I was gonna be like a digital nomad, and at some point, I still will move. Everybody knows Jessie is plotting on her leave. We don't know when it's happening or where she's going, but it's happening, and so I had decided I was gonna do a year of being a nomad. So every month, I was at a different state and Airbnbs and sometimes with family. Sounds cool until you realize you're triggering yourself every month trying to figure out
Mhm,
where you're going to be. And I was like, you know what? I might not be at the age where that is doable. Or if I do it, I need to be doing it for like 3, 4 months, not
mhm,
every month, because that doesn't work. And I think that's something too to be present to as we're aging, quote unquote,
mhm,
thinking to ourselves, like, how do I create a space where I'm at my optimal?
right.
Like, I don't want it to be that I'm spending 3, 4 days unpacking because, I still worked,
Mhm,
so I was still working. I didn't want it to be I'm spending the first week unpacking, finding where things are wherever I'm living. Then I only have 2 weeks and then I'm figuring out where I'm moving the next week.
look, it sounds exhausting, and I'm just listening to it.
I was like, I told people like, I mean, it was cool, I saw different places and met people. However, and
Like you said, that sounds like an amazing thing to do in your 20s,
Yeah,
right?
but at 40, I'm like, I need to have a
Right.
stable location that's my home base, and then I can dip when I wanna dip, but not having to figure out where I'm going to be each month, is something. So one of the things as we're starting to wrap this up, I wanna give people, like, some more insight or just better yet, advice. What does success look like you now compared to what you thought it would look like in your 20s and 30s?
Right. Right. It's interesting you say that because when you're young, success looks like money, right?
Yes.
Lots of money, the cars, the jewelry, the parties, the clothes. And now, as a business owner and someone who's more established in my other career, for me, success looks just like showing up, pursuing my goals, reaching my goals. I just released a book in December. And at the book signing, I was asked that question. And I said, if no one buys a book from me, the success isn't the fact that I'm sitting here holding it.
Mm,
It was the
the
process.
completion.
Yes,
Yeah.
the completion, the journey of reaching that goal is the success. Because
Mhm.
it's really, do we do ourselves a disservice looking for external validations for success
Yeah.
because we can't control how people receive our work, our thoughts, our art, our music. We can't control any of that, but we can control the other side of that, and that's the process and the journey that we take. So I try to always operate in integrity, and so that when I am producing something and I'm putting it out there, I'm proud of it, and
Mhm.
regardless of how it's received, I feel like I was successful in bringing it to life, bringing that idea, that thought to life.
I love that. I love that. And I think more women need to hear that or just more people need to hear that in general. Because it does change. At this point in life, like I am totally okay living in another country on a countryside, not in the hustle and bustle.
Hmm.
Like, I want to have me a garden. Like, I want a low maintenance life where at some point I remember, like, I want to live in this big loft downtown. I don't want any of that, And I think it's important for us to think about like that. So, what's one piece of encouragement you'll give to women in their 40s or higher thinking to launch their first business?
I, I would say really decide to create a business around the lifestyle that you want.
Mm,
Because we are at an age where we have the luxury of making those decisions usually,
yeah,
you can create whatever you want. It doesn't have to look like anyone else's. It doesn't have to operate according to the status quo.
mm,
I could very easy create a business that only operates in the summertime when I'm off work, right?
true.
If that's what I wanted. So just consider the lifestyle you want and create something that is going to come into your life and add to it and not something that's going to stress you out. This is not the time to be stressed out.
At all.
Like menopause and all of those things are already stressing us out. So we don't want to add to that. So create something that you're gonna love and that you can do. And not to say there won't ever be stressful times in business, because that's just part
Mm,
of it.
yeah,
The business doesn't have to be a constant stressor.
yeah.
And so create something that you love and that you're proud of and put it out there to the world.
All right. So that was such great advice. So how can people connect with you?
Absolutely. I have a pretty unique last name. So Carla Erskin, CarlaErskin. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram. If you're local in the Dallas area, I just started a thing. The first one is actually going to be on the 26th, and it's called the Collective Table. And it is a mastermind networking event for women business owners who don't have the support system that a lot of people do and want to create that for themselves. And so I'd love to tell you more about that. You can join my email list. I actually have a free course that is called the Focus 48, and it's a routine around focus, so that we are getting the things done that we need to get done in our day. But I'll also share with you the link to that, Jess.
I truly appreciate it. And I am super grateful for you sharing your changes, your starting over, your evolution, and just your overall experience about your journey into entrepreneurship as while you're still going through it
Yes.
so that people can see that it's not this straight line. It's never
Mhm.
too late. It's never too late to just even evolve inside of what your business looks like. So even if you start something today, that doesn't mean in 10 years it has to look like that. But
Right.
also from the tips you provided is understanding like what is the type of life you truly want to live and the
Mhm.
schedule in which you want to have. So it's been super impactful. I know that people had to get some great notes and tips. And if you are listening to this episode and something spoke to you, share it with your girlfriends, tag people. You can even tag us at the Life Over 40 podcast so that we know that this content is impacting you. So don't forget to subscribe and don't miss out on next week's conversation. Talk to you later.